Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Force here, and today I'm going to be talking with you about my hands-on impressions with the Elder Scrolls Online. I got a good 2 hours this weekend to sit down, just a nice chunk of time, and get to dive in and really experience everything the game has to offer so far. And I gotta say, I came out of that as excited as ever. I cannot wait for the launch of this game, still hopefully later this year, unless things drastically change. That's the current plan. What I want to do here in this video though is talk with you about my experience with the game, take you through those 2 hours, and I guess try to explain as much as I can recall from that event. So let us go ahead and start from the very beginning, character creation. I've got to say there is a ton of customization available. It's pretty much equivalent of Skyrim. I mean, you can customize facial details, body details, and in terms of, if you want to be a skinny character or a large character, all that sort of customization that you expect from an Elder Scrolls game, it is there, and possibly even more. I mean, there's really a ton of stuff that you can do. So if you were worried about being able to customize your character, fret not, the options are there. Now, in terms of what I was able to do, well, during the event, I was only able to select between 3 different, I guess we'll just call them classes, the Dragon Knight, Sorcerer, and Templar. And they've been said before, these are just starting points. There are skill trees associated with these characters, but as time goes on, you can really mold these to what you like. But the point is that you got to choose from 3 of these templates to begin with, and I personally decided to go with a Dragon Knight, and I ended up making him an Orc as well. So I make my Orc Dragon Knight, and then I go enter world. Now, I was told by one of the developers there that there's this whole beginning segment that wasn't included, which basically involves you escaping from Molag Bal. So all of that imprisonment portion of the game that we're so used to in Elder Scrolls games, that will still exist. It just wasn't available in the portion of gameplay that we saw at PAX East. But after that event, what basically happens is you're thrown into the ocean and you're rescued by this crew. And when I started the game, I started from that point. So I had just been pulled from the waters, I was rescued from imminent death, and I'm on this ship, which it was so awesome to start there, because I'm just like, oh, welcome to Morrowind. I begin on a ship here, and I've got to go up a set of stairs before I even do anything else. So I walk into this world here, and the first thing that hit me were the visuals. I mean, this game looks sharp. It is quite impressive for an MMO, and it really does bring that feeling of the Elder Scrolls world. We've seen environmental shots, there's been a few videos of that released, and we've seen tons of screenshots as well, and I've got to tell you, it almost looks better than what I've seen put on the internet. I mean, I was really, really impressed with the visuals and the overall feeling that created. So I come up from the ship, and the first thing that I'm immediately thinking is, okay, I'm playing an RPG, I'm playing an MMO, where are the quests? So I come up from the top of the ship, and I'm immediately looking for quest, and what I notice is up on the mini-map there's this little dot, and that's basically how you're going to be guided to quest in this game. A dot's either going to show you an available quest, or basically a quest location once you have completed a quest. So I walk up to the top side of the ship, and I see this, on the edge of the ship I see this little dot. I walk over to the dot, and there's an NPC that is highlighted in yellow, and what I came to find is that any quest givers in the game, there's going to be this yellow glow around them, basically silhouetting their bodies. So I walk up to the character, and I click to interact with it. I believe the button was E, and then I'm immediately met with quest dialogue, and they've talked about how this game is voice acted, and once again, after confirming with one of the developers, it is fully voice acted. Every single line of text that a character says is going to be spoken to you as well. So I had my first quest, I'm listening to what she's saying while reading along with it as well. And actually, just a funny little side note, they're still working on implementing all of the voices. Some of the quest givers that I had were speaking in like robot voices, which were just sort of placeholders. It was quite humorous nonetheless. But yeah, it's going to be fully voice acted, and that's kind of cool and kind of exciting as well. I've expressed concerns about, people spending too much money on certain parts of games in the past, and you do concern yourself if, hey, how much money are they spending on voice acting? Is that going to take away from other areas? But we're not going to worry about that now, and that's not an important gripe for me to have right now. The point is that the sort of immersion that creates, that results in a really awesome experience for the player, and I really, really liked that. So yeah, I got my first quest, and then I'm about, trying to figure out, okay, what to do next. Now, basically, the first quest that I got was the people that rescued me. I had to go free some people who were captive by pirates in the nearby area. So here I am with my Orc Dragon Knight. I've got my first quest, I've got my mission. I need to go to this nearby little town and free these people who were taken captive. So I'm walking in, and the first thing that I notice after engaging on my way to town is there's a couple of wolves that as I walk up to, they turn around and will just use MMO turns. They aggro to me. And so these two wolves aggro to me and they're coming at me. I'm like, two wolves? Come on, I'm a Dragon Knight. I got a sword and a shield. I'm all set. They were tough. The thing I immediately noted is just, right when you start the game, they throw you into pretty difficult combat, and coming up against two enemies, it can give you a run for your money. Like, I came very close to death numerous times just coming up against two enemies. Now, this was alleviated over time once I leveled up and I started to get abilities, because when you start the game, no matter which one of the classes you chose, you don't have any abilities. You basically just have your weapon. So I had a sword and a shield, and that is it. And I'll go in depth a little bit about the combat, but man, it started off difficult, and I was really happy about that, because I feel like so many games, they really ease you into things. But you start this game and you are given a challenge right away, and if you see two enemies coming at you at once, it's scary for those first few levels. So since this was my first bout of combat, let's go ahead and talk about combat. The very basics are there that you expect, and this is really where the Elder Scrolls feeling of combat comes through. So what's going to happen is you've got your left mouse button for attacks. There's a light attack and a heavy attack. Heavy attack has a wind up, light attack happens much quicker, pretty much as you expect, and then right mouse button is going to allow you to block. Now, an interesting thing about the blocking is if your opponents, so your opponents have multiple attacks too. They've got essentially light attacks and heavy attacks. If your opponent is throwing a heavy attack at you, this is telegraphed ahead of time, and you can block it, and that's going to stun them. They actually get knocked to the ground for a short duration. It's only a couple of seconds. It's only like about 2 or 3 seconds. It's not that long, but it's a really cool mechanic where there's this little telegraph, and there was these little sparks that sort of came out when they were doing this. At least this one particular enemy character holding two-handed weapons. They're telegraphing this big attack that's coming. You see it coming. You stop what you're doing. You put up your block, and once you hit that attack, they get knocked to the ground, and you're free to get off a few swings, essentially. And I really thought that was a very interesting mechanic to the game, and definitely adds some tactics to your gameplay to be able to see these things and respond to them and put yourself in a better situation as a result. Same thing goes with avoidance. There is double tapping to dodge, and actually concerning that matter, I'm hoping that they add some sort of a modifier or basically an alternate key. Double tapping to dodge is great, but I think a lot of times it ends up people dodge by accident, and that would stink in this game because you end up using your stamina, so it's something you'd probably want to avoid. So I hope they do something like maybe a shift alternator where you can do shift W, shift A, shift D, shift S to dodge in that direction. Something along those lines. Some sort of, again, a modifying key as opposed to just the double tapping, because again, there can be some really big issues with the double tapping. So in terms of those basic mechanics, that's basically what you're looking at. You can do those blocking and you can do that dodging to avoid incoming attacks, and that's sort of where the skill is going to factor into the equation there. There's also going to be a run button. There's left shift, so if you ever need to run away from anything, left shift is going to give you that option. That's going to use up, of course, your stamina. And then control is to sneak. Now, I didn't find the sneaking necessary, but I also wasn't playing a sneaky focused character, so that didn't come into play, but it pulls from the Skyrim. You've got the eye there, and when you're spotted, it's going to be fully up, and when you're going into that stealth mode, the eye is going to essentially close down until you're not spotted by anything. When I actually first tried to sneak on the boat when I just started the character, the eye was fully open. I was like, what the heck is going on? Turns out a rat was looking at me, so I had to kill the rat, and then after that I was able to go in full stealth. But I was first confused because I said there's no enemies in this room, but again, the rat pulls me out of stealth. So let's go ahead and keep on going since we're focused on the combat route here. So again, combat started off pretty difficult. It was alleviated after I started to level up and get some abilities. In terms of those abilities are bound to your number keys. It was either 1 through 5 or 1 through 6. I think 6 is supposed to, I think it was supposed to be 5 normal abilities, then 1 ultimate. But anyways, it was your number keys 1 through 5 or 6, and then there's also for the binds, Q was also bound, and that was a quick slot bind for consumables. So I was able to put health potions and mana potions there, or magicka potions there, and I'm assuming other consumables that might come into play that you could put in the quick slot as well. But for my playthrough in those 2 hours, it was just health and magicka potions, and that was basically it. And speaking about health and magicka, I was really surprised about this. Both health and magicka regenerate while you're in combat just innately. So while I was fighting, if I were to take a few hits and my health would drop down, that would regenerate over time. And it was regenerating pretty quickly. Now that could just be because we were in the early stages of the game, but it seemed like I was regenerating a good about 20% of my health every tick. I couldn't tell you the time on those ticks, but I would say it's somewhere around the 5-second vicinity that I would regenerate about 20% of my health. That might seem a little, maybe it's a little bit longer than that, but there was a regeneration to my health, and it was noticeable. Like I was gaining significant chunks of health during that time. Now, we should keep in mind that that might not be a percentage, it may be an actual number, so that early on when you're first starting the game, like I mentioned, it can be pretty difficult before you get abilities. That might be to help during that situation, and if it is literally just a set number, like you gain 10 health every X amount of seconds, then obviously in the later game, that's not going to factor in at all. So, but even with that health regeneration and mana regeneration in combat, it was still quite difficult before I picked up those abilities. Now, once I leveled up, well, let's go ahead and talk about that. The leveling up was quite interesting. So you level up and you immediately get to decide, you get 1 point to put into your magicka, your health, or your stamina. And that's going to work just like it did in Skyrim, just like it's worked in prior Elder Scrolls games in terms of what benefits you get from increasing each one of those. Now also when you level up, you get to put a point into one of your abilities or ability trees. And the way it worked for the Dragon Knight was, I don't remember the exact name, I think that there was a pull that was called Dragon Reach, and there were 2 other abilities. One of them was basically a shield knockdown or a shield bash, and the other one was this armor that sort of produced a Thorns effect, where if I mitigated damage and I would also reflect some damage back. So once I hit level 1, I got to choose one of those 3 abilities. It was either a Fiery Reach, where I pull a target towards me, sort of like a Scorpion ability, the Shield Bash, doing damage and knocking someone down, or the damage mitigating Thorns self armor. So I started off picking the Shield Bash. I found that to be really useful early on. It was a really cool ability where I would use up some of my magicka, I would hit the enemy that I'm targeting, they would get knocked down and take some damage, and they would be incapacitated for a brief moment. And it was a short amount of time, sort of just like the knockdown when you reflect heavy attacks. It lasted about 2 or 3 seconds. It wasn't that long, but enough time to get a couple of shots off. Now, it was at that exact moment that I had leveled up that I was speaking to a developer, and he was able to tell me that the way that's going to work is, although we've got these different skill trees, and it was basically divided into 3 sections. Again, I can't recall the names or anything, but there were 3 different sections, 3 different trees with which I could level down my Dragon Knight. And I ended up just putting 1 point into each as we went along there. But he said that once you fill up that tree, or once you complete that, then after that point, it really starts to diverge in terms of the focus that you want to have. And there's also focus on, you get to level up different types of armor, so heavy armor, medium armor, or light armor, depending on when you use it in combat. You're basically gaining experience in using that, and then you can level that up. As you level up, spend points into that specific focus and to get specific benefits from it. So I guess, for example, if you're wearing heavy armor and you continue to use it in combat, you level up, you spend a point to upgrade your heavy armor once you've gained a set amount of experience while using it, and then you're going to get increased to tanking capabilities, just as an example. And then beyond that, there are going to be more skills and abilities you can get from the various different factions within the game, the various guilds, if you will, and then Cyrodiil PvP and stuff like that. And all this stuff's going to give you more access to more abilities to really customize your character. And then there's also depending on the types of weapons that you're using. So for example, I was using Sword and Shield, and while using up Sword and Shield, I'm basically leveling up my capabilities in Sword and Shield, and I can spend points in that to upgrade my Sword and Shield capabilities become more effective using that weapon combination. So all these things really interesting. I wish I could give you more detail on it, but I wasn't there recording, and we couldn't actually record any footage from the event, and I was so focused on just playing and experiencing as much as possible that I didn't get to write too many of those details down. But I would imagine that you've got a pretty good idea after talking about it how that works. Now, something I also want to mention about combat is that this game does have what's known as animation priority, specifically for attack animations is where I noticed it the most. And what animation priority means is basically attack animations of a character within a game, they take priority over character input. So specific examples where I would be attacking an opponent and I would hit my left mouse button 2 or 3 times, and that would set up a combination of attacks. He'd go 1, 2, 3, do this little back and forth, swinging from the left side, the right side, trying to hit different angles. While he was in the midst of that, if I saw an incoming attack that I wanted to block, I could not interrupt my character's animations, so I couldn't stop mid-attack after clicking the left mouse button 3 times to block an incoming attack. So now animation priority, that's a development decision. It's basically putting more weight behind your decisions. If I decide to set up a 3-attack combo, I better be damn sure that that's exactly what I want to do, because if halfway through I'm like, nope, I want to block now, you're not able to do so. Now, on one hand, I'm not a huge fan of that because I like the ability to really have the action focus, quickly respond to the situation. But again, it's a design decision, and it's meant to put more weight behind your decisions. You've really got to be certain of the things that you're doing. So what that's going to mean to you guys is when you're playing, you're going to really focus. If you want to play moment-to-moment combat, you're going to be doing 1 swing at a time. You're not going to want to set up 2 or 3 swing combos. But if you knock down your opponent or you stun them, freeze them in place, whatever, then you can set up this 3-attack combo, go 1, 2, 3, and then, the 2 or 3 seconds extra time after you're done clicking that animation is still going through, you're able to take that time and maybe mentally think of what's my next step. Let me do my next ability. I don't need to focus on following up with another attack now. So again, it's a design decision. It makes it less action focused, like for example, like a Terra. That's a good example of an action MMO where you can sort of interrupt your attack and go quickly to a blocking or something like that. Actually, I'm not entirely sure if they do that. But anyways, that is the way the attacking works here in the Elder Scrolls Online. There is animation priority. You can't stop yourself mid-attack. At least I wasn't able to while playing through at PAX. And one other complaint that I currently have, and this is something that can certainly be adjusted before release and throughout the beta, but the combat felt pretty floaty, and what that means is that there didn't feel like there was a lot of weight or impact behind my attacks. That's something that, once again, can be tightened up before the game's launch, and it could also have more to do with latency issues than the actual gameplay itself, but I just didn't feel like there was much weight behind the things that I was doing, and I get that feeling a lot more in other action MMOs that I've played. But once again, this isn't a full-on action MMO. This is an MMO that's got action elements with the left mouse button, right mouse button, attack and blocking, but with the soft lock system and with that sort of animation priority, it's not as much as other games. But it definitely did feel a little floaty. I hope that's something once more that they can tighten up before launch. Speaking of the soft lock targeting system, I want to talk with you about that. So here's how it works. If I can walk up to an enemy, I can just start swinging with my left mouse button and hit my abilities 1, 2, and 3 to do some attacks on them. Now, if there are multiple targets, there's a couple ways you can do it. Basically, what's going to happen is anything your cursor is moused over, that's who you're going to hit. But with the soft lock system, there's also a tab system built within that where you can tab target your priority. And now what's going to happen is when you tab over someone, there were these little, it's basically the character is boxed in. There were these white triangles put in 4 corners, and the character is boxed in as your target. Now, if your cursor is not moused over them and it's moused over someone else, you're going to hit whoever you're moused over. But if there's 2 enemies right next to each other and you're worried that you're not going to hit your right target, you hit tab and it's going to box around each character. You box until you get to the one that you want, and then even if the other character standing right in front of you or right beside them, you're not going to hit them. You're going to hit the one that you're tab targeted onto. Now, this is something that for me alleviated some concerns I had about, say, melee characters stopping ranged characters from hitting opposing ranged characters. So I've got a healer with a tank standing in front of it. Well, if I'm a ranged mage or something, or an archer, I can hit that healer in the back by using that tab system and making sure I'm moused over them. But once more, with that soft lock system, even if you're tab targeted onto something, if you mouse over something, that is not within that boxed tab target area, you're going to hit whatever you're moused over. So the mouse over is going to be the most important thing. Unless there's two targets right next to each other, then the mouse over is going to hit whoever you're boxed within through that tab targeting system. Within my 2 hours of playtime and all the combat that I experienced, I felt like it worked pretty well. It was definitely something that I had to get used to because I don't have much experience with that sort of soft target system, but it worked out pretty well. It felt okay. And one last thing I really want to mention about combat is that enemies had some position altering moves. Specifically, there were these assassin characters that would literally jump over the head of my character. Now, speaking with a developer there, I talked with him a little bit about, I don't know if you guys saw the video prior that I did, about first person and the fact that they were adding spell animations. A couple of things that I felt were interesting that he said. First of all, the game was, as I mentioned in that video, primarily designed from a third person perspective. Specifically, not all the way pulled back, but just right over the shoulder. So just pulled back a little bit further than what you'll get in first person view. He also told me that the first person animations and just implementing that into the game, as I suspected, it's gonna be an expensive endeavor that's gonna take some time, but at the end of the day, they decided it was a great experience. Specifically, a lot of Elder Scrolls fans would really love it, and they felt like it was worth their time and money. And, you know, after the video and reading comments, I agree that this is probably going to pull in enough of an audience that it's going to be worth it for them as a developer to sell copies of the game and to get people interested in it, to include that animation ability. But I want to just go back on that a second and talk about that enemy altering position thing. This is sort of exactly the type of thing that I mentioned in my last video, saying that this is the thing that first person would struggle with. There were assassin characters that while fighting, they would jump over my head towards the back of me, which, you know, I guess either way you're going to spin around and you can deal with them, but it might be a little bit more disorienting for first person characters because that's something that you've never had to deal with before, really. I mean, in Elder Scrolls games, you're fighting someone, they're right in front of you, and as long as you're facing them, unless you spin around, they're not turning around behind you. But in this game, with that initial third-person focus in the general design, they've made characters that do stuff like this, that will literally just jump over your head and behind you. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I just wanted to mention it to you guys that does exist, and being able to make sure that you're aware about things to your side and behind you is going to factor in this game. But either way, I guess if you're playing in first person, you can just spin around, so that'll work just fine. Okay, so we've talked about the game's combat in some pretty good depth. As I mentioned before, I think visually the game looks great. It looks sharp, not only impressive for an MMO, but it really has that Elder Scrolls feel. In terms of world interaction, I think that's the only other really big thing that I wanted to talk with you guys about. You know, the Elder Scrolls, we can pick up things, we can move them around. You can't do that in this game. It's an MMO. Things are where they are in terms of environment. However, you can still pick things up. So as an example, there would be boxes that I could walk up to, and some of them I could loot, and there'd be something inside, and I'd pick it up. And some of them there'd be like a mug on the top, or a stack of coins, or a potion, and I could pick those up. It was sort of weird though, because I'm so used to, I think it's just because I'm used to it. I'm so used to, you pick up an item and it goes like, it like makes that little noise and it just ends up in your inventory. It was sort of weird because when you loot the items in this game, they do this dissolve effect that probably takes about a second or 2 seconds, and the item just dissolves out of existence. It like fades out of existence. That's just a preference thing. I think I prefer the quick disappearing. You pick it up and it's gone just like that. Not a nitpick, not a complaint, just an observation. You can pick up items, some of them, not all of them, and they will dissolve once you do. And then finally here, I want to quickly mention the UI. It's split between Magicka, Health, and Stamina at the bottom, like we see in Skyrim. And the character, in terms of when you're pulling up information, you've got your character screen in the upper left that'll show basically the gear that you've got equipped. And then your inventory was in the upper right. Now the UI can be adjusted from what I understand, so you can sort of move this stuff around to wherever you want once the game is out. But that was basically the default. Something else about the inventory that I thought was really awesome was there are these tabs to divide them into sections. We've talked about this in the past, but there's basically an all tab, and then you can split it up by gear, by consumables, by crafting items, by weapons, etc. Some, basically the standard stuff there. But the tab system's really awesome to basically going through your inventory. The inventory was visually displayed in a list, so from top to bottom, basically the items that you have. And I'm assuming that there might be some sort of sorting feature there as well. You can maybe sort by price or sort by type or whatever. But even without a sorting feature, with those those tabs, it's going to be easy to go through and look specifically for what you want. It's like, hey, I've been playing for 30 minutes. Did I pick up any weapons? Let me go to my weapon tab in my inventory. Oh, yes, I did. Let me use that. That's a pretty awesome upgrade. I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah, there are tabs to divide your inventory is basically what I'm coming around to. And I think that's going to do it, guys, for my hands-on impressions for the Elder Scrolls Online. Sorry for rambling a bit. I just wanted to make sure that I covered everything that I remembered from the events. At the end of the day, I got to say, this really feels like it's in the Elder Scrolls universe, not only visually, but the sounds and the music. And while the combat, it's not exactly like Skyrim. It has those elements. It's got the, again, the attacking and the blocking with the left and right mouse button. Obviously, things are a little different by adding the hotkeys. I felt like the combat felt fine, though. And while it does feel a little bit floaty right now, I overall enjoyed it. The attack animation priority that exists, once again, that's a design decision. But just know that when you're setting up your combinations with attacks, if you're doing a heavy attack or multiple attacks in a row by hitting the left mouse button 3 or 4 times, you're not going to be able to stop that right away and right block with it. At least I couldn't find a way to do so. Maybe there's a key besides the block to cancel animation and then go straight into blocking. But again, those are just things that I noted. Either way, I'm really excited to spend more time with this game. I can't wait to get my beta access and have more time with it and talk with you guys more about this upcoming MMO set in the Elder Scrolls universe that we're all so excited for. All right, guys, that's going to do it here. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. And as always, keep watching and keep owning.